Thank you, Brenda. And thank you, Michelle, for your withering stare of bringing the room to a quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, Dean Christensen Hughes, honored guests, members of the selection committee, faculty, and students, I am truly honored to be here with you and to receive the Lincoln Alexander Outstanding Leader Award. Anything that allows me to be associated with this great Canadian is both humbling and inspiring. So my thanks to the committee for selecting me. Since I learned I would receive the award, I have given a lot of thought to this issue of leadership. Obviously not nearly as much as those of you in these classes, but it is a sweeping word with a lot of dimensions, and it's a challenge to describe, but I think each and every one of us have a picture of it in our own minds. There are thousands of books, speeches, movies that focus on the subject, and I don't think my speaking in general terms will add much to the narrative. But perhaps by telling you some of my own personal experiences about leadership, I might be useful to you. It's safe to say that few of us ever set out in life intentionally to try and be a leader. In my case, I think it came through the pursuit of my goals, and it just seemed to sneak up on me. It seems by focusing on getting something done, something I was passionate about, I often found myself in the lead. I've also come to see that there's a great deal of luck in being a leader. Luck to be living at a certain time and place with a good start in life. But it's also the willingness and ability to take risk, to say yes when opportunity knocks. Maybe is just not an option. Blink and you might just miss it. I started working when I was 21. My first job was as a sales trainee in an investment firm in Toronto. 3 years on, at my grandfather's request, I left him to join him at Conwest, a small mining exploration company that he had started some 25 years earlier. The president, who worked with my grandfather for many years, hired me as assistant treasurer, a modest title with no tasks, no responsibilities. It was quite clear how he felt about my arrival. I soon discovered that being excluded from all discussions about the business left me highly unsettled, as you can well imagine. I definitely started to feel paranoid, and as the saying goes in business, only the paranoid survive. This became the fuel for my engine. After months of staring at closed doors, I concluded that to succeed, I was going to have to gain control of the ownership of the corporation. It's true, it's the only way I was going to get it. The good news was that by being excluded, I got a lot of time, I got a lot of inspiration, and a lot of irritation to move me forward to pursue my goal. Conwest at the time was a relatively small company with a market cap of around $10 million. It was effectively controlled by my grandfather and our extensive family. I personally had a small stake through a trust that he had created just shortly after I was born. So here I was, starting my career at a company, a small shareholder, and effectively shut out of the business. My grandfather was extremely protective of his vision of ownership and had no interest in changing that calculus. I also knew that I couldn't get ahead of him by going head to head. So instead I went underground, and it was here that I would learn patience, perseverance, and build confidence that I was going to need to win. I just didn't know how to make it happen. Nor did I know how long it was going to take. But it did, in fact, take 14 years. I quietly advanced my acquisition process one step at a time. By year 10, the wind was at my back, and I was well on my way to reaching my goal. I had successfully added 2 junior colleagues to my small team, and they became my principal allies that both would figure large in our company's future. Then, without warning, in the mid-70s, we were plunged into a serious recession and a dramatic stock market reversal. As part of my business strategy of getting control, I borrowed a lot of money. However, with the markets in disarray, the bank was now ready to call my loan. For anyone who's been there, this is about as scary as it gets. I could see my dreams slipping away and my capital going up in smoke. Yet when things were looking the darkest, we managed to convince the bank that we could generate the cash and pay back the loan. We were still going to be in business. Now, in case you thought that was enough of a risk to take on, how about my venturing into the bar and restaurant business as a way to finance my acquisition costs? In the late 1960s, Toronto the Good was pretty much a wasteland of opportunity in nightlife. The timing for new action was perfect, and over the next decade, I worked with 2 colleagues, different partners, and we managed to open a combined 15 different establishments. My goal was to make money that I needed for debt management and my acquisition of shares. My friends, colleagues, had a simpler vision: to make money and have some fun. They were really good at it, and it made a big difference to my financial capacity. Interestingly, given all the risks I had taken on, I never doubted for a moment that this strategy was going to work. I knew I was out there. Debt plus bar profits was definitely a weird and risky strategy for financing an acquisition. And to add to complexity in my private life, I'm reminding you, I'm still under 30 at this time. In my private life, I now had 4 kids, and my first marriage was coming apart. As John Wayne said, courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway. Looking back at this time, it was the right place to be. Though there were days when I thought life on a South Pacific island might be preferable. By 1979, I had put the last piece of control together of Conwest, and I flew to Miami where my grandfather wintered. I wanted to tell him that I had succeeded in gaining control of the company. Even then, I'm not sure he was entirely happy to hear this news. While I knew he was at one part proud, I also knew that I had interfered with his vision of a family compact. For me, the acquisition was a huge event and marked the end of a long process. It also marked the beginning of a whole new phase for the company and for myself. But other events came along that were a catalyst for even a bigger change in my life. While I was waiting in line and in the lounge for my flight home, I noticed a beautiful woman sitting across from me in the waiting area. I was so knocked out by her that when she boarded the plane, I couldn't resist doing something I'd never done before. I tried to pick her up. It worked. And now, 33 years later, we're still happily married. So, lesson number 1, when the Cupid arrow strikes the heart, don't hesitate. These 2 events, plus one more, would shape my future. Shortly after completing the control moves, I asked my colleague John Lamacraft to take on the role of CEO. I then kicked myself upstairs. By this time, John had proven himself as a brilliant executive. For the first thing he did was to exit the hospitality business, which had lost much of its luster. The next he did was to push us aggressively into the oil and gas sector. He was totally right on both counts. 16 years later would lead to a very successful outcome for our shareholders when we were bought out by Encana. When this transition to John was complete, I was left basically underemployed, which also meant I had a clean slate, was 39 years old, and in a position to pursue interests that went way beyond where I had been. Getting control of Conwest was the mountain that I needed to climb, but now that I had, I could move on. I didn't have a clue what that was going to be. I had no plan, I had no roadmap, but with Linda and a degree of financial independence, I had a chance to do something totally different. Linda had the ability to see things clearly where I always managed to make things complicated. It was her clarity that was so important in untangling the options that lay before us. As life would have it, early in 1980, after we were married, we went on a holiday trip through the Nile. Our wanderings to the historic villages and sites took us through many impoverished villages. All of this was brand new to me. It was this experience that would ignite a fire in my mind. Coming face to face with the injustices of poverty left me ready for action. Without understanding where the trip would take me, I had opened the door to something that was going to change my life. Linda and her father Cedric, a totally engaged volunteer who deserves a full chapter in this speech and in my life, gave me the confidence I needed to get going. As Yoga Berra once said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. Now, in fairness, I wasn't any stranger to this world of volunteer leadership. I was, in fact, a full-time employee at Conwest, but I was also working at a volunteer level, largely outside of my day job. I had a couple of experiences that would indicate a future direction. First, by some quirky set of circumstances, I was asked, as Brenda mentioned, by the promoters of the Toronto International Film Festival to be their founding chair. 7 years later, I stepped down, but not before I had opened my mind to a bunch of people that were way outside of my world. Actors, movie makers, directors, entertainment wheeler dealers. One more gift of experience that would keep me off balance and direct me towards that road less traveled. The other experience came about as a result of a volunteer act my friend and I had performed while in our mid-20s. We were invited to join the advisory board of the Salvation Army, and were the youngest by an average of 40 years. For 15 years, I sat at the corner of their board table until one day they circled back. Out of the blue, tapped me to chair their capital campaign for the new Scarborough Grace Hospital. The moral of the story, show up for 15 years and someone's bound to notice. Before I knew it, I was chairing the advisory board and the Red Shield appeal. Trial by fire and a growing interest in my community was a consequence. My tours of their city and with the staff of the Army gave me an insight into the backwaters of the city that are still with me. So many acute social injustices being addressed by these dedicated officers of the Salvation Army. I was getting my lessons in leadership and a healthy dose of outrage. Lesson number 2, take advantage of the opportunities to mix it up. Get out of your comfort zone and open yourself up to people who are outside of your day-to-day life. But the Egypt experience was a revelation, and it did indeed transform my thinking. It also led me to take the next step, a 6-week trip that Linda and I took to over 30 different development projects in Bangladesh and India. This indeed was a life-changing experience. Me, the suited guy from Toronto, thrown into the world of poverty and chaos, and as we quickly discovered, tough odds, incredible ingenuity, and no end of initiative. This trip would irrevocably alter my life trajectory. I became impassioned to try and change the world. But what to do? Where could I make a difference? I wasn't a doctor, a teacher, a planner, or a social worker. I soon realized that my role would have to be shaped by my own personal experiences. I was basically an entrepreneur, a business person with a good financial training. The solutions I saw in the world around me were shaped largely in commercial terms. Lesson number 3, play to your strengths. Over the next 25 years, Linda and I took our travels from villages in Bangladesh and India to cities like La Paz, Bolivia, Rio in Brazil, Lagos, Nigeria, First Nation reserves in Ontario, and countless other places on our planet that we are fortunate enough to have the privilege of visiting. With each visit, I became more aware and edgy about the uneven allocation of our world's resources. I also developed a tremendous respect and admiration for the people that we met along the way. I was deeply moved by their incredible ingenuity, their capacity to survive, usually against what I thought were incredible odds. Within 2 years on this quest, we had created our own entity, Calmetto, to help organize our interests. Then, through a chance meeting in 1983 with Axion, an American charity, I first heard about microcredit. This is a term we all now know was popularized by Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel Prize winner from Bangladesh. Axion had been developing some early models of credit delivery to poor micro-entrepreneurs in Latin America. They warmly welcomed Calmetto into their tiny club. As Oprah would say, this was my aha moment. Thus began a 22-year run through the world of micro-enterprise finance, one that I embraced with total passion. There was going to be no going back. This was it, the greatest opportunity to make a difference that I could possibly imagine. Here was a way to reach potentially millions of self-employed, low-income people. And it could be done in a way that could support a commercial approach that was scalable, sustainable, and easily replicated in different settings. Somehow, we had shifted our thinking on the model from charity to commerce. At the time, microfinance was still in its infancy, but within a few short years, Calmetto had moved from making grants to designing and funding banks. I think it was out of this passion and determination to see the idea reach scale that I fell into the leadership role that I occupied for several years. It was a role for the taking. Lesson number 3, when you see an opening, grab it. It may not come around again. Coming from a world of enterprise, I moved with a passion to embrace philanthropy, only with a twist. I was now absolutely convinced that to be of use, I would have to use my business experience to address social needs. In doing this, I knew I was an anomaly, but being an anomaly and standing outside of my peer group had its advantages. I didn't worry about what people thought. They either got what I was trying to do or they didn't. If the idea seemed solid enough, even a new idea, I learned there were always a handful of us who were ready to take the plunge. Risk was seldom the issue. There is always external money to be found to implement a good idea. It may take several years to put it together, but it can be done. And it was immediately obvious to me that by leveraging my own resources with those of others, one could actually get to scale a lot faster. Lesson number 4, find like-minded partners to lever your own time and financial resources. Going it alone really can exhaust you and hold you back. You have to develop a tag team to be able to keep going. I became convinced that by being willing and able to take risk, take the lead where necessary, and being determined to succeed, I somehow would. Leadership positions seem to follow. Lesson number 5, leadership comes to those who will lead. During the 90s, Calmetto took the lead in a number of microfinance initiatives that would help change the industry. The first included a bank startup in Bolivia. Next came the creation of 2 microfinance private equity companies, one in Latin America and one in Africa. I had the privilege of chairing both, and together with my colleagues, we raised over $50 million for direct investment in microfinance. We were definitely moving the needle. Our Latin American fund took 10 years to operate, returned all of its capital with a 6% yield. The African fund still goes on and has so far returned over half of its capital. I don't think there were many who really expected us to succeed, nor did they expect our impact would increase the number of customers served by our partner institutions to well over 1 million, all with loans averaging less than $1,000. And in the process of investing, we had changed the nature of microfinance to a business model that had the potential to reach millions. Now, 20 years later, there are literally hundreds of funds at work with several billions of dollars in play in virtually every corner of the developing world. Now, not everything worked out quite as expected. We tried microfinance experiments at home in Canada, and it just didn't work to the same degree. After many attempts, we closed the door, and the experience failed. But from that failure, we learned a lot, the most important being that not all good ideas are portable from one part of the world to another. Lesson number 6, cut your losses, learn from your mistakes, and move on. I think it's obvious that I've had a lot of luck in life. I've definitely been in the right places at the right time. But I think the patience I learned in those 14 years it took to gain control of Conwest gave me the ability to get my focus and hold it on the ambitions I had for my goals. Being engaged in the early days of microfinance business, working with Linda on the development of Ace Bakery, the Toronto restaurant and bar scene, the film festival, and the Toronto Community Foundation, I was clearly operating outside the boundaries of my traditional peer group. Yet the more I operated outside of this space, the more confident and optimistic I became. I was doing it, I was making a difference, and I was having fun most times. Lesson learned number 7. Don't be afraid to be an outlier. In fact, it's fun to be there. I have Linda. I have a strong and supportive family, all actively pursuing their own visions. I'm pleased with most of my achievements, and I still remain restless and irritated with the social inequities that I continue to see around me. I have no desire to sit back. The job will never be done. There are just too many potholes to be filled. Lesson number 8, don't sit on the bench. Keep yourself in the game. I hope my story has given you some insights into leadership as I know it from my own personal experience. And before I conclude, here are a few thoughts from my own lessons learned. First, choose the right life partner. Having a strong, supportive, and loving partner provides a platform that shrinks the mountains of concern and fears and fires our confidence one needs to succeed. Coupled with that are investing in the love of and from family. Secondly, get out of your comfort zone. Shake it up. Expose yourself to people and places that unsettle you and force you to grow. Third, be patient but persistent and focused. Progress is seldom linear, so you need to keep the passion alive. Each of us has a different motivation driving us. In my case, my passion was fueled by a slow-burning anger at the injustices that I was witnessing. Get these things right, and if you have a half-decent personality, like people, and believe in them, the leadership will follow. Be a player. Thank you.